We're learning precious little more about a possible active shooter in El Paso, Texas. The police there tweeting out, asking people to stay away from a local mall. The NBC affiliate reporting that this is at a local Walmart. Sometimes those things can be one and the same in terms of the area. And with that, we bring in former D.C. police detective, Fox News contributor Ted Williams. Ted, in these situations where we have these sort of very, very, very sketchy initial reports, active shooter can mean the same thing as somebody heard a couple of gunshots. It can also mean somebody going on a rampage. But as Jillian and I were talking earlier, the response now from police departments tends to be the same: send the cavalry and then pull back.
Absolutely, Leland and Jillian. That is the protocol now, is for when you have an active shooter like this, is to actually move in. Certainly you've got a cadre of first responders, meaning that you have law enforcement officers as well as ambulances services that are moving into that area. What is happening at this stage are twofold. One, law enforcement who are very much in the El Paso, Texas area. These are highly trained law enforcement officers, and they've trained for these kinds of events. So they are setting up a perimeter there. But also what is going on, Jillian and Leland, is that they are also monitoring social media sites, or trying to get as much information from perhaps either employees or if it's centralized at the Walmart in that shopping center, as well as customers.
It's amazing how in these active shooter situations, and when people hear gunshots, so often they tweet about it rather than calling 911. As we're looking in terms of where this mall is, it is only a couple of miles, it appears, from the U.S.-Mexico border, sort of between the border and El Paso International Airport, along a major interstate there, I-10. And you've got all sorts of not only this mall, the Vista Mall, but then also a movie theater and then a number of the big box stores along the way.
Police in El Paso, Texas say they're responding to an active shooter situation. They're warning people to avoid the area of Hawkins and Gateway East. Rosa Flores is joining us right now with this. So this is a shopping mall, shopping strip. And what more do we know about whether there's one potential gunman or multiple?
We have very limited information at this point, Fred, but what we do know, and this is just into our newsroom, at least one person has been injured, and this is at El Paso Walmart. Like you said, this is a shopping center. We're trying to learn more about this area. Actually, one of our producers has visited this particular shopping center and just covering the news. And she says that on a normal Saturday, or normal weekend, there's a lot of people shopping at this shopping center. We've also learned that 3 businesses are on lockdown, and these 3 businesses are reportedly around this shopping center, around this Walmart. These businesses are the Landry Seafood House, Hooters, and also Red Lobster. We're getting reports from witnesses on the scene who say that there were people running around. They could hear helicopters overhead, police responding to the scene. Of course, a very active scene and a very active situation, and police and fire officers and firefighters asking people to avoid this area because it is still an active scene, and police, of course, responding. We don't know anything about the potential shooter or shooters at this time, but we're asking those questions, hoping to learn more. But again, the latest that we've learned here in the CNN newsroom is that at least one person has been injured. We're making more phone calls, trying to get more information, Fred, and we'll get it to you as soon as possible.
And just looking at that aerial shot, that kind of Google map, it's difficult to discern whether that's like an enclosed mall. You know, it certainly is a collection of a variety of stores there. You mentioned the 3, you know, rather sizable restaurants that are on lockdown. Do we know anything more about, you know, this mall, you know, whether it's open or a closed mall?
We don't, but we're trying to learn more information about that. And in just thinking about the time of year, Fred, we're very close to start of the school year. So, some of the things that could be happening at Walmart is families going to this shopping center and others around it to get school supplies, that sort of thing. That, of course, a huge concern. But again, the latest report that we have into our newsroom right now is that at least one person is injured.
All right, Rosa Flores, keep us posted. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right, let's talk further. With me now, former Secret Service agent Jonathan Wackrow and former Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security, Juliette Kayyem. Good to see both of you. So, Jonathan, you first, give us an idea of how law enforcement approaches a situation like this.
Well, listen, these are very dynamic and unpredictable situations. And when police first get report of an active shooter in a vicinity of just a general area, right now, El Paso police and responding law enforcement have a very wide area of operation that they need to contain and then address the threat immediately so they stop the active shooter. Terminology here is key. Active shooter means that there is a suspect or multiple suspects that are engaged in the act of shooting a weapon and causing destruction and harm to individuals and property. So it's key here that they're still utilizing the word that it's an active scene and that there's an active shooter. So that means that the law enforcement has yet to address this threat and mitigate it. So, the public should heed the warning that's being put out via social media and other outlets to stay away from this area because you could be put in harm's way.
Juliette, that some of the businesses are on lockdown. Help folks understand that the strategy involved there. When you have a lockdown situation, you still have an active, shooter, and people might be worried about, being more vulnerable when they are asked to stay put.
So just picking up on what Jonathan said in terms of how to read at least what we know now coming out of the police, I think given the amount of time that it's been since that first tweet to now, one has to assume there is something in terms of their inability to get the shooter or shooters. And so there's a variety of options that we tell the public when you're in law enforcement. One is run, if that's available. But in this case, it appears that because they don't know where the active shooters are, or maybe the person or people are isolated to, say, the Walmart, everyone else is much safer actually barricading inside, not being vulnerable to stray bullets or any sort of shootings that may occur. And that's what the police are asking them to do. The fact that the Walmart seems to be a focus of it, and Jonathan certainly knows a lot of this, you do have workplace violence issues. You also have family issues that may get a little bit violent. I don't know about the Walmart rules in El Paso, but certainly Walmarts also sell weaponry. And so there's just a lot of variables right now. But in terms of protecting the vast majority of the public, you got to stay put. And if you think someone is in the area, just stand back for now, unfortunately.
And then, Jonathan, talk about the resources, for local authorities to be able to handle and how they approach something like this, and at what point do federal authorities get involved?
Well, I'm sure federal authorities are going to be immediately involved, but the first responders are the El Paso police. It's their tactical units. Just prior to coming on air, I did take a quick look at the El Paso police website. They are very well versed. They have mandatory training around active shooter protocols, as well as they've expanded into their Citizens Academy. So they take a public-private partnership in terms of how do they address and respond to these critical incidents of active shooter situations. So immediately, the first responders on scene, the first law enforcement officer that arrives, their duty is to go in and address that threat, to try to put that threat down immediately. That is a challenging situation right now. We are talking about a very large area, whether it's Walmart, the mall that's next door. Reports that are coming into 911 and other sources also can lead to some sort of chaos or confusion for responding officers. So right now, in the immediate action is command and control, containment, and addressing that threat.
And so our affiliate KSTM is now reporting too, that multiple victims are involved here. We don't know the extent of injuries or the status, but that many have been injured. Democratic presidential candidate and former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke is responding to this, tweeting out, "Truly heartbreaking. Stay safe, El Paso. Please follow all directions of emergency personnel as we continue to get more updates." Juliet, what are your thoughts and concerns based on very thin information that we have, just that it is active?
And Jonathan and I, unfortunately, were together last weekend. We'll be super careful about what we know now, and just reminding people. Last Sunday, the original reports were that the police had killed the shooter at the Garlic Festival. We've now learned a few days later that it was actually a suicide. So these first reports are really tend to be not that they're always wrong, but they are just something that is part of the information we have to take in.
And Juliet, as you're talking, we're seeing video that's just now coming in. It looks like someone's cell phone video running, moving. You can see now what appears to be one shopper running. And we don't know in which location this is, whether that's, in one of the lockdown locations, and these images have been sent. Oh, now we're seeing them actually in the parking lot running. I don't have anything more to tell you about how these images were obtained, the story of this, but you can see it puts us there in a moment. The sheer panic, what happens after people hear gunfire or hear that there is an active shooter.
Right. To run away is obviously the right response at this stage. And you led, as Jonathan was explaining, that the only priority of the police right now is to get the shooter. It's actually not to get people out of the building right now. They need to get this shooter or shooters to bring it down. If we're hearing multiple reports of injuries, it means that let me put it this way. The fact that the El Paso police have not provided any more information says to me that this is at least serious active shooter case, and they do not have any news to provide except to the public. And this is where these are lessons learned after Columbine and after all these active shooter cases. The best the police can do right now is just provide information to the public in the surrounding area. Stay put and do not go to that area. I know it's hard for people watching, have family members in the area.
And let me ask you, Jonathan, quickly. So we've seen these images. We see what the Dillard's department store. Rosa Flores has reported on a Walmart being there and other big restaurant chains. And now that gives us a better idea about the size of this shopping mall. These are large establishments, which means a lot of people on a Saturday early in the day. Talk to me about the then approach from law enforcement to deal with something geographically so large on the map.
So again, it goes to containment. Law enforcement has to set up a perimeter. They have to, try to, contain this threat. Ensure that if there is an active shooter, that individual, that threat doesn't try to put their weapon down and integrate into fleeing individuals. So this is a very dynamic and challenging moment for law enforcement as they're trying to address this threat. Complicating the matter further, as we're hearing that there are injuries, emergency medical responders are not going to go into an active shooter zone. They're not going to go into a hot zone. So that makes it much more difficult, where the responding law enforcement is there. Their primary mission is to put that threat down.